August 1975, 3 in the morning in a Memphis parking lot, and snow is falling under the streetlights. A family of 4 is huddled in the back of a station wagon, hatch open, blankets piled around them, cardboard boxes crammed against the sides. The father sees headlights approaching and pulls his kids closer, trying to shield them. Elvis Presley steps out of a white Cadillac, black leather jacket, sunglasses even in the dark. He walks straight to the back of their wagon. The father freezes in humiliation. This is Elvis Presley seeing his family living in a car. Elvis crouches down, looks at the children wrapped in thin blankets, the desperate conditions they're surviving in. "How long you been out here?" The father can barely answer. Elvis reaches into his pocket, pulls out his car keys, and hands them over. "Follow me." The father thinks it's charity, maybe gas money. He doesn't understand yet. Elvis doesn't explain. He just drives. And that family. They follow through the snow, confused and terrified, not knowing those keys are about to unlock something impossible. By 1975, Elvis Presley owned Graceland, a fleet of Cadillacs, and a bank account most people couldn't imagine. Sold-out shows, gold records lining the walls. The world knew Elvis the performer, the sequin jumpsuits, the hip swivels, the voice that changed music. What they didn't know was the other Elvis, the one who drove Memphis alone after midnight, windows down, looking for what he called real people. He kept cash in his glove compartment, thousands, sometimes tens of thousands, rubber-banded in stacks. For emergencies, he told his inner circle. His accountant hated it. Colonel Parker called it reckless. Elvis didn't care. He'd grown up in Tupelo in a 2-room shack with no running water, watching his father scramble for work during the Depression. "I remember what nothing feels like," he told a close friend once. That memory never left him. It's why he drove at night. It's why he carried those keys, looking for people who needed what he once needed, a way out. The gas station encounter happened fast. Elvis didn't hesitate, didn't ask questions. He saw the children's faces pressed against the glass, the shame in the father's eyes, and made his decision in seconds. "Follow me," he said, and drove straight to his lawyer's house on the east side of Memphis. It was 3:30 in the morning. Elvis pounded on the door until the lights came on. Ed Hookstratton, Elvis's personal attorney since 1970, opened the door in a bathrobe, took one look at Elvis's face, and knew. "Another one?" Ed asked. Elvis nodded. "Family of 4, sleeping in their car. I need you to make calls." Ed was used to this. He'd handled Elvis's projects before. Hospital bills paid anonymously, cars given away after concerts, mortgages cleared for struggling families. But this time felt different. Elvis wasn't just handing over cash. He wanted something permanent. "Find them a house," Elvis said. "Today." Ed started making calls before the sun came up. By 7 a.m., 3 real estate agents were working the case. Here's what most people didn't know. Elvis had done this before, multiple times. Ed kept records in a locked file cabinet in his office. 7 families helped in the past 18 months, 3 cars given away, 2 houses purchased outright, countless medical bills and rent payments covered in silence. Elvis had one absolute rule about all of it. Nobody talks. Ever. No press releases, no photo ops, no publicity. When a Memphis reporter got wind of one case in 1974, Elvis buying a wheelchair-accessible van for a paralyzed veteran, Elvis's team killed the story before it ran, paid the reporter's editor to spike it. Elvis's generosity was real, but it came with a price: complete anonymity. This time, though, was different. The family was too desperate. The father, a laid-off factory worker named Jim Patterson, was a Vietnam veteran with medical debt from his wife's emergency surgery 6 months earlier. They'd been evicted 2 weeks ago, living in that Chevrolet with 2 kids under 5. Word was going to get out. The question was when. By 9 that morning, Jim Patterson was sitting in Ed Hookstratton's office on Union Avenue, still holding Elvis's car keys, convinced this was some kind of prank. His wife Sarah sat next to him, silent, their 2 kids in the waiting room with a secretary. Ed slid a folder across his desk. "Cash purchase, 3-bedroom house on your name, today." Jim stared at the papers. He'd spent 3 years in Vietnam as an army mechanic, came home to a factory job that paid decent until the plant closed in March. Medical bills from Sarah's appendectomy had crushed them, $12,000 they couldn't cover. Eviction notice came in July. 2 weeks living in that car, parking in different lots each night so police wouldn't hassle them. And now this lawyer was telling him Elvis Presley, the Elvis Presley, was buying them a house. "This is real?" Jim asked. Ed pushed the deed across the desk. On it, next to Jim's signature line, was a set of house keys. Right next to the car keys Elvis had given him hours earlier. "Sign here," Ed said. "He wants you in by tonight." Elvis returned to Graceland around 10 a.m., exhausted. Colonel Parker was waiting in the living room, red-faced and furious. "You bought another house?" Parker's voice echoed off the walls. Elvis ignored him, poured himself coffee. "They had kids sleeping in a car, Colonel." Parker didn't care about the sentiment. He cared about the money. Elvis's finances were already a mess. Decades of unchecked spending, questionable investments, and a touring schedule that barely kept up with expenses. "You're not a charity," Parker said. "You're a business." Elvis set down his coffee cup. The thing was, Elvis knew Parker was right about the money. He also knew he didn't care. This wasn't about business. It wasn't even about kindness. It was about the weight of memory. His mother Gladys doing other people's laundry in Tupelo to keep food on the table. His father Vernon borrowing money they couldn't repay. Elvis himself wearing hand-me-down clothes to school. Fame had given him everything. It hadn't erased anything. So Elvis made a decision that morning. Double down. He called Ed back. Add furniture, groceries, first year of utilities paid. Parker left the room in disgust. By noon, word was starting to spread. Jim Patterson's former neighbors in the apartment complex, the one he'd been evicted from, heard something was happening. A few phone calls. A cousin who worked at the courthouse. By 2 p.m., a local reporter named Frank Mercer was making inquiries. Mercer worked for the Memphis Press Scimitar, had covered Elvis before, and smelled a story. He started calling around. Real estate offices, lawyers, anyone who might know details. Elvis's people scrambled. Phone calls to editors, quiet pressure applied. Frank Mercer was persistent, though. He found Jim Patterson's old address, talked to neighbors, pieced together the eviction timeline. By late afternoon, Mercer was parked outside Ed Hookstratton's office, waiting. The strange thing? Jim Patterson didn't want publicity either. He'd told Ed that morning, "I don't want people thinking I'm a charity case." Pride, even in desperation. Elvis's team saw an opening. Ed Hookstratton met with Jim, explained the situation simply. You stay quiet, Elvis stays quiet, and this stays private. You go public, and it becomes a circus for everyone. Jim agreed immediately. Later, they'd reach Mercer too, but through an unexpected path. That same August afternoon, Jim Patterson and his family pulled up to a modest 3-bedroom house on a quiet street in southeast Memphis. The lawn was mowed. The paint was fresh. Ed Hookstratton met them at the front door with a final envelope. Inside the house, furniture was already arranged. Beds made, refrigerator stocked, children's toys in the smaller bedrooms. Sarah Patterson broke down crying in the kitchen. Jim stood in the living room, unable to speak, holding those car keys in one hand and the new house keys in the other. Elvis wasn't there. He'd sent his lawyer as his representative, maintaining distance. In the envelope Ed handed over, receipts showing property taxes paid 5 years forward, and a trust fund statement. Money set aside for the kids' education, managed by Ed's firm, untouchable until they turned 18. Jim opened his mouth to ask how to thank Elvis, but Ed cut him off. He doesn't want thanks. He wants you to do the same thing someday if you can. Pass it forward. Ed left them there, standing in a house they owned, purchased in full by a man they'd met once for 90 seconds at a gas station at 3 in the morning. Understanding Elvis's generosity requires understanding his childhood. Born 1935 in Tupelo, Mississippi, in a 2-room shotgun shack built by his father and uncle. His twin brother Jesse was stillborn. His mother Gladys worked as a sewing machine operator and washerwoman, taking in laundry from wealthier families. His father Vernon cycled through odd jobs: milkman, truck driver, factory worker, never making enough. In 1938, Vernon was convicted of altering a check and served 8 months at Parchman Farm Prison. Gladys and 3-year-old Elvis moved into a relative's house, dependent on charity. Elvis watched his mother's humiliation as she accepted handouts from church members. When Vernon got out, the family moved constantly, evicted from multiple homes. By the time Elvis was 13, they'd relocated to Memphis, living in public housing projects. Elvis's first guitar, the one that changed everything, was bought secondhand because his mother couldn't afford the bicycle he wanted. "I remember what nothing feels like," Elvis told a friend in 1974. That wasn't a metaphor. It was memory. The gap between his childhood poverty and his 1975 wealth wasn't just financial. It was a chasm he tried to bridge by finding people still standing where he once stood. People sleeping in cars. People one paycheck from homelessness. People who needed what he once needed, a way out that didn't require begging. Frank Mercer, the reporter, finally tracked down the Patterson family 3 days after they moved in. He knocked on their door, notebook ready, offering money for an exclusive interview. Jim Patterson refused. "Some things are sacred," he told Mercer. But Mercer was persistent. He'd spent a decade covering Memphis, knew how to work sources, and sensed this story could be big. He started calling Elvis's publicist, Ed Hookstratton's office, anyone connected. Elvis's team prepared a counteroffer: cash, access to future stories, anything to kill this one. Then something unexpected happened. Mercer was a veteran himself, Army, 2 tours in Korea, 1952 to 1954. When he learned Jim Patterson's background from a courthouse clerk, something shifted. Mercer showed up at Jim's house again, this time without his notebook. "I just wanted to tell you something," Mercer said. "I was going to write this story. I'm not anymore." Jim asked why. Mercer said, "Because some things are bigger than a headline. You got a second chance. Don't waste it explaining it to people." Mercer walked away. He never wrote the story. Years later, after Elvis died, Mercer would finally tell people what he knew. But in August 1975, he kept his silence. The story stayed buried. The family stayed anonymous. And Elvis kept driving Memphis at night, looking for his next emergency. 6 months passed. The Patterson family settled into their new life. Jim found work at a distribution warehouse, steady pay, benefits. Sarah got part-time work at a grocery store. The kids started preschool. They sent a letter to Elvis, a thank you note, heartfelt and simple, but never mailed it. It felt insufficient. How do you thank someone for saving your life in one 90-second encounter? Jim kept Elvis's car keys in a wooden box on his dresser, next to his military medals and his grandfather's watch. He'd take them out sometimes, turn them over in his hands, remember that night at the gas station. Years later, he'd pass those keys to his son with a story. "These belong to the man who gave us everything. Not the money, the chance." The keys became a family heirloom, a reminder that desperation can end in seconds if someone notices. Elvis never contacted them directly. No follow-up calls, no visits. He'd moved on to other emergencies, other families. His pattern continued through 1975 and 1976. More cars given away after concerts, more hospital bills paid anonymously, more houses purchased in silence. His accountants grew increasingly worried. Colonel Parker raged about the spending. Elvis ignored all of it. He'd found something more valuable than money: the ability to change someone's entire life in the time it took to hand over a set of keys. By 1977, Elvis's health was deteriorating. Prescription drug dependency, weight gain, exhaustion from constant touring. But his generosity never stopped. According to people close to him, he gave away an estimated $300,000 in the final 2 years of his life. Houses, cars, medical bills, rent payments, all handled quietly through Ed Hookstratton's office. Colonel Parker was furious but powerless. Elvis's entourage, the Memphis Mafia, tried to intervene, worried about his finances and his health. Elvis wouldn't listen. "What's the point of having money if you can't fix things that should be fixed?" he said once, exhausted after a show. On August 16, 1977, Elvis Presley died at Graceland, age 42. The official cause was cardiac arrhythmia. The real causes were more complicated. Years of prescription drug abuse, physical exhaustion, isolation. When his estate went through probate, accountants discovered the full scale of his charitable giving. Hundreds of thousands spent on people whose names didn't appear in any official records. Families helped in silence. Lives changed with no publicity. Ed Hookstraten had kept meticulous records, but even he didn't know the complete total. Some of Elvis's gifts were never documented. Cash handed directly to strangers, bills paid under fake names, houses purchased through shell companies to maintain anonymity. After Elvis died, families started coming forward. Slowly at first, then in greater numbers. People who'd been afraid to speak while he was alive, worried about violating his privacy, suddenly felt released from that obligation. The Patterson family was one of them. Jim gave a single interview to the Memphis Press Scimitar in 1978, finally telling the story of that night at the gas station. Other families followed. A widow whose mortgage Elvis paid off after her husband died, a musician whose medical bills Elvis covered after a car accident, a single mother whose rent Elvis paid for 2 years straight. Ed Hookstraten's records showed 14 families directly helped with housing or major expenses, but the real number was likely higher. Media coverage exploded. The public was shocked. They'd known Elvis as generous. He famously gave away cars and jewelry impulsively, but nobody understood the scale or the consistency. This wasn't celebrity charity. This was a pattern, a mission, a man systematically trying to rescue people from the kind of poverty that had once defined his entire childhood. The Patterson family donated Elvis's car keys to a museum exhibit about his life in 1985. Those keys, scratched, worn, ordinary looking, were displayed next to a placard explaining what they represented. One man's instant decision to change 4 lives forever. Here's the truth nobody talks about. Elvis Presley died nearly broke. Not because he was reckless with investments or because he was cheated, though both happened. He died broke partly because he couldn't stop giving away his money. His unchecked generosity, combined with decades of expensive habits and poor financial management, left his estate valued at barely $5 million at his death, a fraction of what he'd earned. His daughter Lisa Marie would later inherit an estate rebuilt through licensing deals and careful management. But in 1977, when Elvis died, he had little left. Colonel Parker had taken 50% of everything. Bad investments had consumed more. And the rest? Elvis had given it away, one family at a time, one emergency at a time, one set of car keys at a time. The people who knew him best, the Memphis Mafia, his close friends, his family, said he never regretted any of it. He bought more houses for strangers than for himself, one friend said years later. Those car keys that started everything, the ones Elvis handed to Jim Patterson at 3 a.m. in August 1975, now sit in a museum in Memphis. They're displayed in a glass case with a simple label, "Keys to a Second Chance." They look ordinary, scratched metal, worn grip. The same keys that unlocked a Cadillac now represent something bigger, instant, unthinking compassion.